Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders officially have their starting center. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I am RC Maxfield, reminding you, if you want the latest breaking Texas Tech men's basketball news all year long, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button to stay in the know right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel. And yes, Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders do indeed have their starting center. At least that's how I'd project it. And Warren Washington, the Arizona State transfer center. And let's be honest, this was a recruiting battle between TCU and Texas Tech. There were a couple other schools in the running late, like Michigan and stuff like that. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty, this was between the Horned Frogs and the Red Raiders. And Grant McCasland wins a big recruiting battle and gets his projected starting center, a much-needed add for the Red Raiders. In this video, I'll give you a scouting report of Warren Washington, break down his game a little bit, and then we'll also look at the current roster with the addition of Warren Washington and how many scholarships are remaining at the current time of his commitment. All right, let's jump into this as, again, I really like this addition because I've talked about Warren Washington in previous videos, and he is the perfect complement and guy in a Grant McCasland run offense, and even better defensively because he's long, rangy, athletic, big. He has experience. This will now be his fourth school in 5 years. So for some of you Tech fans making fun of guys going everywhere else, you got Warren Washington now. So there you go. You giveth and you shall receive, I guess, in this situation. But let's jump into it. As Warren Washington is a 7-footer, legit 7-footer, 225. He averaged 9.2 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 1.8 blocks per game last season. As I mentioned, 3 schools in 4 years for him. Started at Oregon State, went to Nevada, then Arizona State. 1 year of eligibility remaining for the big man. He is a long, athletic big that really hides quite a bit of flaws of your defense, okay? He's offensively good roller in the pick and roll. Doesn't have much of a jump shot, if any at all, right? But he is a good lob threat and understands spacing well when it comes to setting a good hard screen and then rolling to the basket and finding that soft spot in the defense, right? Good hands for a big man as well. Solid passer from the top of the arc, 1.6 assists per game. I will say, though, he tries to force the envelope sometimes when it comes to those passes from the top of the key. He does have a high turnover rate, and sometimes he power dribbles instead of just going straight up. It's a common problem in college basketball, but overall, I think he does a really good job of managing that and not doing it too much. Right? He runs right down the heart of the floor, and that's exactly what I love from a big that is athletic like him. Run straight down the middle of the floor, make yourself a big target, have your hands ready. As I mentioned, he's got really good hands, right? And make yourself available. That is something that is huge, right? Take 2 giant steps and boom, you're right at the rim, basically, right? In transition. Now, when I look at things that he does on the defensive side, it starts with how long and rangy he is. He is truly one of those guys that makes up for a mistake that his teammates make, right? And it's bound to happen. But when you have a legit 7-footer that's athletic, that's long, rangy, and fleet of foot like he is, his footwork really impressed me in the tape that I saw in the games that I went back and watched. He's got really good footwork for a 7-footer. And now, am I saying that I want him guarding a point guard, ideally on the perimeter? No, but I think he can do it, and mostly because of his length and his footwork. He's got really good hips in terms of pointing them to where he needs to go, and usage of his body is really good in terms of not fouling at the rim, going straight up, and using those long athletic wingspan that he has to create mismatches that maybe he wouldn't otherwise have if he got caught up in a pick and roll and had to go on a guard and the guard's going straight to the rim. He can make up for it with his long, rangy wingspan, and also how good his footwork is down low in terms of making up ground if he does get beat, right? Now, the thing that really is interesting to me in this whole thing is, again, I think he's a plug-and-play guy. I really do. I think he is your plug-in, day one, starting 5. Now I'm interested to see who can play alongside him, and I don't think there's any limitations with that. I think you can really get creative now that you have him and with your rotations in terms of your bigs, right? So you think about the bigs on this roster, and you got Lindsay, you got Jennings. I'm going to throw Darion Williams in there. He's more of a forward, in my opinion, so I'll categorize him into the big section, even though he's more of a tweener. And now you've got Warren Washington, okay? And when you look at what Warren Washington does, and by the way, it is going to be absolutely brutal for announcers. You got a Demarion Williams, Darion Williams, and now you got a Lamar Washington and Warren Washington. Brutal. At least you don't have as many last names to remember. But anyway, you can plug and play guys alongside each other with mismatches now in terms of, hey, if you're trying to go out and get a little bit more in transition, put Lindsay and Washington together, and then you always have our attacking big. If you need a big that needs to stretch out a little bit more in terms of the mid-range game, there's RJ, right? If you want a guy and you just want to play 4 out and 1 in with Washington, you got Darion Williams. You have options now, but he was an absolutely critical piece for the Red Raiders, and it's good to see that he lands in the 806. All I ask you to do right now, simply like the video if you are excited that Warren Washington is headed out to the 806 to play for Grant McCasland in year number 1 and presumably be the starting center for the Red Raiders in 2023 and 2024. Again, just simply like the video if you're excited to have Warren Washington. All right, let's jump into the Texas Tech current roster with Warren Washington added, okay? So 6 players are listed as of today on the roster, or on the site for Texas Tech, texastech.com, right? You got Isaacs, Lindsay, Jennings, Walton, Williams, Washington, right? All the returnees. And of course, I'm talking about Lamar Washington and then Demarion Williams there. But the players expected to come to Texas Tech, they've either signed their national letter of intent through the transfer portal or they have signed it through the high school ranks. Right now, you've got Chance McMillian, you got Darion Williams, you got Jason Jackson, Drew Steffi, and of course, the commitment of now the presumed starting center, Warren Washington. Listen, you need a couple more wings on this team, or at least potentially a dynamic guard that's in that 6'4" to 6'6" range. Like, you need another guy that can play out on the wing if need be, if you're Texas Tech. But in terms of retaining talent, right, and going out and getting guys that maybe aren't the flashiest guys in the portal, I think Grant McCasland has done some things that are very promising for Texas Tech in terms of, listen, Darion Williams, can stay at Texas Tech for another 3 years. Chance McMillian has got 2 years of eligibility. You have a Band-Aid type effect, and even probably more than that in Warren Washington, who only has 1 year of eligibility left, but you get a starting center out of it, right? You retain guys like Pop Isaacs. You retain guys like Lamar Washington. Robert Jennings comes back. You got Lindsay coming back as well, right? Like, you retain some of those young fundamental pieces that you need to build a successful program long-term, right? And now I get it. It's modern college basketball. Things change relatively quickly, and those guys may be gone next year. But as for year 1, I think he's done a really solid job of going out and really identifying guys that he thinks he can coach up, fit the culture, and also fit the scheme. And one thing about Grant McCasland that I think is underrated for his coaching style is this. You can't really put him in a box. This guy has adapted to the talent on his team, and he will continue to adapt to the talent on his team. If his team is telling him, hey, we need to go out and run and gun more, he's going to do it. If you need to slow the pace, you saw that at UNT. If we need to shift from a defensive-oriented team to an offensive-oriented team, we can do that. You can see what he's done at UNT on his resume, as well as Arkansas State, in terms of going in at the D1 level and making substantial adjustments in year number 1 and having a winning program. Now, what does that look like in year number 1 with now Warren Washington at the center position? I'm not sure. It's the Big 12. There's a lot that can happen here. I mean, shoot, perfect example. Kansas State, then Iowa State the year prior. Am I saying Texas Tech is going to be that? No, I'm not. But I am saying I do like what he has done so far on a fundamentally base level to help ensure that Texas Tech does have a foundation still to build upon and still be competitive in the Big 12 early on, especially with the guards. And now with Warren Washington at the center position, you feel a whole lot better in terms of the bigs that Texas Tech has. You probably still want maybe 1 or 2 more, but Warren Washington was no doubt a big piece. No pun intended. Again, one more time, like the video if you are excited about Warren Washington headed to the 806. And if you want the latest Texas Tech men's basketball news and rumors all year long and faster than anybody else on YouTube, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button to stay in the know right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel.